everyone, Clio here, and today I'm going to be reacting to the 12 books that I was supposed to be reading in 2020. So I already know part of what I did with that because there are certain titles that I was aware throughout the year that I still needed to read and that I actively decided against at some point in the year. So I know that it's not going to be 100%. I definitely didn't read all of the books that were on there. I can already tell you that, that's already a spoiler. But while there were some that I know that I got around to, some that I know that I decided against, I don't have a full 100% certain list in my head of all the books that were on that list. I do definitely plan to make that much more conscious in 2021, and I'll have my 12 books for 2021 linked up there. But for my 2020 list, it's definitely not the case that I'm aware of all of them, and so I don't really know, will I even succeed? Will I have read 50-50? "12 books for 2020. So what is on that thumbnail? So I read that, I read that, I read that, I read that, I read that. I did really good based on that thumbnail. On that thumbnail there's only one book that I didn't read, but let's check it out because there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The half of them are on there. That means that I'm definitely close to at least succeeding in getting more than half of them done. You know, I only need to read 2 more books than the ones that are featured there. So, I mean, let's not jinx myself here. I don't know about you guys, but I'm already so excited for the next year. I feel like, sure. In a way. So in 2020 it was the second time that I made a list like that, but I decided to reduce it from 19, which I'd done 19 books for 2019, to 12. And I definitely think that that's the best idea for me, and I'm continuing with that in 2021 because, you know, I'm a mood reader. The longer that list is going to get, the less likely that I'm actually going to get around to all of those books. So I'm just keeping it manageable, 1 book a month, and I'm not even making myself read one of these every single month, but sometimes sometimes I will need to read more if I'm not going to read one every single month. But so let's dive into the books. First up is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I don't know too much about this book, but this book... Yeah, so this is one of the ones that I decided to unhaul, so I will link the video where I made that decision up there. But so Catch-22, I actually ended up doing it, and I actually ended up trying it out in a try chapter tag, so it made it quite far into the unhaul process before I actually decided on it, and it had its charm, and I definitely did like the writing style to it, but I was also not interested enough into this book because it is a World War II story, I think, or at least some sort of a war story, and I'm not necessarily all that interested in that premise in itself. And you know, mainly the reason why I had that on my shelf was because it is such a big name, because it is such a big pop culture reference name, and so in the end I was like, you know, I only know if it's by its title and by the fame of its title. I don't know too much about what's actually happening in there, and I'm not interested enough to really find out. So decided that I have some more books on my shelves that I'm more interested in. Book is always on those lists of best books of all time, must-read books. So I want to read this one for myself and see what all the fuss is about and whether it deserves this type of praise. I assume that will mean that there's some sort of important message to our time, or it might have had an important impact on the literary genre. But so I'll be discovering that for myself when I get around to it. Next up is a book for which I've seen the movie. I love the movie, but I also know that it's not for everybody. But main reason why this landed in my bookshelves is because it won the Golden Man Booker Prize. You know, I was kind of unsure whether I wanted to read it because the movie I really like the movie, you know, but the movie's slow for a movie. And then you can imagine that the book is also going to be slow, most likely. And so I don't always do well with slow books, so I was kind of hesitant to go into it, but when I won the Golden Man Booker, I was like, okay, I'm going to assume that means something, you know, that out of all the Man Booker Prize winners of the past 50 years, they've decided that the one book that was most worth it was this one, and that is The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. Read it. So I'm very happy that I finally read it. It is not my new favorite book of all times or things like that. It definitely was slow in its parts as well, and I definitely and I think I prefer to consume it as a movie, but that often happens when I read the book after I've watched the movie, so that doesn't necessarily say anything. I think it had beautiful language, beautiful atmosphere to it, but the consumption of the story worked just as well in movie as it did for me in this book form, and in that sense it is a lot easier to get through the movie than to get through this book, because it was a book that did take quite a lot of focusing power, quite a lot of mental energy to fully be able to grasp what was happening. But it was definitely an interesting one. It is also a wartime story, so not necessarily one of the stories that most interest me. So if you have more of an interest in wartime stories, you might also love this one more. But all in all, I understand why it won the Golden Man Booker. I think it's beautifully written, it's a beautiful story. It didn't blow my socks off. It was good, great, but not amazing and not a new favorite. And if I like this one, then I can also dive into his more recent book that was also nominated for a Booker Prize, which is Warlights. But I'll first go through this one and see whether his writing style is to my appeal or not. Next up, we have a book that I'm reading and that I'm planning to get around to in the month of January. I don't know, I'm saying this already now, it's the month of November, but I'm also dying to get certain things, certain reads in, and so maybe I will change my mind about that. But at this point, my goal is to read it in January, and that is Quixote by Salman Rushdie. I don't know whether I read that in the month of... No, I didn't, because it's the... So, Quixote was... or Quixote, I don't remember how you had to pronounce it in this version. Quixote, I think. But so Quixote, it was on that list because it was nominated for the Man Booker Prize. It was on the shortlist for the Man Booker Prize in the 2019 edition of the Booker Prize. And yeah, it was on there for that reason, and it was also the final book of that shortlist that I read. I kept on pushing it back the entire time, and so I finished it in July. I finished it 2 days or so after the new long list for the 2020 edition was announced, so I was technically too late for what my goal had been, because I wanted to finish the entire long list for 2019 before the announcement of the long list for 2020, but I did end up getting around to it. And actually at this point in time I'm reading the Don Quixote, because that was part of the reason why I kept pushing it back. Part of the reason was because I wanted to read Don Quixote first, but Don Quixote is such an intimidating read that I didn't end up getting around to it, and so I ended up saying, like, just read Quixote now, and then, you know, one day you will get around to that Don Quixote. And in the end, Quixote ended up being quite a disappointment, though I will say now that I'm reading Don Quixote, I think it would probably have been a better experience if I had read the Don Quixote first, just because I would have seen a lot more parallels with that. But on the other hand, the book also needs to stand on its own. I remember it drawing too much into the story and not really fulfilling any of its elements to my satisfaction. Yeah, that didn't end up happening. So I did finish the 5th one still in 2019, but the 6th one, first of all, is my least favorite Harry Potter. It's the one Harry Potter, I think, that I only read once in its entirety. So in part I was looking forward to finally rereading it and making up my mind about it. Maybe I would like it more now. But I also kept pushing it back, and it was like around May when I still hadn't read it, and that is around the time, I think, that the whole J.K. Rowling tweets fiasco happens. And so I never followed J.K. Rowling personally. I never have a lot of interest in following authors. J.K. Rowling was no exception for me, because I always just loved Harry Potter in itself and never really associated it with its author. But so yeah, since I've been more active on book Twitter, I was made aware of things that she was tweeting, and I absolutely do not condone what she's saying or do not support the message that she's saying, do not believe in the message that she is putting out there. And even though I am a firm firm believer of separating art from artist. It was very difficult for me to do that in the case of J.K. Rowling, and you know, maybe one day I'll get back to that point where I can pick up a Harry Potter book. But at this point in time, first of all, I wasn't really enjoying my reread of Harry Potter all that much because I was getting a lot more critical of it than I was when I was, you know, younger and when I was still like had all of that nostalgia around Harry Potter in itself. Also, it was like more or less the first full reread of every book in its entirety that I'd done in a long time, because I'd usually just reread certain passages that I was feeling nostalgic about. But you know, also just the whole disappointing experience with figuring out that J.K. Rowling had these views and was really actively pushing those views to the forefront made it that I really didn't feel like picking up Harry Potter, and then I also just allowed myself to do that because it was a valid reason not to pick Harry Potter up at this point in time. So perhaps it will happen one day again. I also discussed it in my unhaul video. I haven't unhauled them yet. You know, they were such a part of my childhood. They were such a big part of the reason why I am a reader, why I love reading so much, why I love fantasy so much, that I am still holding on to them. But who knows? In a couple of years' time, perhaps more of the nostalgia will have faded and then I might be able to get rid of them. So yeah, this didn't end up happening. I didn't read the 6th one, didn't read the 7th one, didn't watch a single Harry Potter movie in 2020. Already having difficulties with the years at this point in time. So Half-Blood Prince definitely coming your way in 2020. No. Next up is A Confederacy of Dances by John Kennedy Toole. Same deal. So not the same deal as Harry Potter, but same deal as Catch-22. This has been on hold during my unhold process, and I'm not entirely sure how far it got into the unhold process. Maybe I unhold it immediately, maybe I put it in the maybe pile and unhold it there. Definitely didn't get into the try a chapter tag, but so I still don't really know what the story is about, but I know that a friend of mine has read it, and when she heard that I wanted to read it, she was like, "No, don't do it. It's really boring, and you know, it's really not worth it." And it's been on my shelves for a very long time. I put it on that list for a specific reason, because it was one of the oldest books on my Goodreads want to read list, I think. And so at that point in time, when she warned me off against it, I hadn't gotten to it yet. And so when I got to that unhaul and I remembered how she had been negative about it, how I clearly haven't shown an interest up until this point, I decided, you know what, just let it go. Next up is a book that I will say I've known about this book forever. I wasn't interested, but it also got nominated for the Golden Man Booker, and the third book in the trilogy is coming out soon, and everybody's raving about how this is one of the greatest authors of our times, and this is one of the greatest trilogies. So I actually also now want to explore what it is about, and it's Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Yeah, so I read Wolf Hall this year and I enjoyed it, and I recognized the brilliancy of the author in it, but it's also not one that blew me away, and it was quite hard work for me to read it because it is a trilogy that's all about the life of Thomas Cromwell, and it's told in these sort of like vignettes in which we're kind of following Thomas Cromwell at different points in time, and you really had to pay attention to it to be able to figure out where we were, because there were also time jumps, and it was quite difficult because I don't know anything about Thomas Cromwell, and so that meant that I really had to pay a lot of attention, because sometimes I was like, huh, wait, but didn't that already end up happening? And then turned out that we were like in a different time period. And so I liked it just fine. Since I've completed that book, I have also been super hesitant about picking up the sequel, because I remember how intense of a experience it is, and because I remember that while it was great, it also didn't have such a big payoff, that I'm now eager to dive into it. So I don't know if it's ever gonna happen, because in part I've kind of decided that I'm probably not that interested in continuing, but you know, for the time being, I guess it will stay somewhere on my radar, because, you know, a lot of people that I've heard say that the second is actually their favorite, so maybe I should. And the second is also a lot shorter than the first and third one are, so maybe it will end up happening. Next up is another Man Booker Prize, well, Booker Prize, this year is just the Booker Prize. So next up is another Booker Prize nominee, and that is Ducks Newberry Fort. Yeah, I read that one. So I finished the shortlist for the Booker Prize, the long list even. So yes, I read that book, and it was an experience. And you know, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, nor do I regret having done it. But it was a lot of my time and it was a lot of my effort, but I did really understand why it was on that list, and I did really respect what the author had done, and I've never known a character as well as I've known that character through that reading experience, because it's a 1,000-page stream of consciousness book in which we are following the thoughts of a Ohioan housewife as she's preparing cakes or pies for this independent business that she has. And so it's a lot about the anxiety that she feels for what is taking place at that point in time in the US. So it's a lot about anxiety about the election of Donald Trump, a lot of anxiety about climate change and all of those things. And what I thought very interesting about it is how it wasn't just like stream of consciousness where we're getting all of her thoughts, but you would also through that see that, you know, a lot of her thoughts would circle back to the same sort of things. It would circle back to memories about her mother, it would circle back to those big issues, therefore really building the sort of like essence of her character, the essence of what is taking place with her as a person, you know, what the essence of what really builds her personality. And while it was a struggle to get through because not a whole lot is happening, you almost never know what is actually taking place. And so in that sense, if it weren't for the audiobook, I would have never gotten through this book. But in the end, something happens. It was leading somewhere. However, did it need 1,000 pages to get there? Maybe not. On the other hand, you also wouldn't have had as strong of a connection perhaps with that main character if you hadn't built it for so long. So I'm on the fence about that one. I enjoyed it and I absolutely appreciate what it had done, and I think it was definitely a unique experience, but I wouldn't necessarily push this experience on other people. Second book in my Harry Potter reread, and obviously the last one, and that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. No, didn't read that one. You know why. I've been saying Diego Cervantes the entire time, but it's Miguel de Cervantes. So Don Quixote de la Mancha is a 16th century classic. So indeed, I constantly say Diego de Cervantes, but it's Miguel de Cervantes. I had that same issue when I was trying to introduce this book earlier. But so I didn't read it in 2020. Now, in part, I will say that is very much a conscious decision because I, at some point in time, in the month of July, I decided to participate in the Count of Monte Cristo read-along that Ashley, I think, from the Bookish Realm, yeah, she was hosting that one. And so I had not put the Count of Monte Cristo on this list. The Count of Monte Cristo is another huge classic. It was like the third biggest book on my shelves when I started it. And so I decided to trade in the two parts of Don Quixote for Count of Monte Cristo and to push back Don Quixote to 2021, which I'm doing right now. I am reading the Don Quixote in January and February. I already started it. I'm reading it right now. And I gotta say I'm really enjoying it, though it is a lot of work because I have it in the Spanish edition. So basically I'm actually reading it double now because I'm reading it in Spanish and I need like Google Translate on the side for like when I don't know a word. I can understand the word based off of the context, but I kind of want to know the exact word. And then once I finish the chapter in that way, I listen to the audiobook in English to make sure that I've really understood everything that took place within that chapter. So I'm gonna be reading the Don Quixote twice this year in that sense. So yeah, that's enough payback, I guess, for not having put it into my 2020 TBRs. Kind of bored with it, but I hope to be proven wrong, of course. This is in total, of course, the biggest chunk of my reading this, but in that sense, it's good that I have it in like a 2-book edition that I can spread it over multiple months, maybe even. And then the final book on my 2020 TBR is the final shortlisted book for the Booker Prize for me to get to, and that is An Orchestra of Minorities by Chigozie Obioma. Now, yeah, I got around to that one. As I said, I finished the entire shortlist long list, so this one I definitely got around to. And it is also on my best books of 2020 video, so if you want to know more about my reading experience with that one, then I will link that video up there as well, because I was absolutely blown away by this one, and it is the one that I heard like the least people say anything about. So I was kind of shocked with loving it in that sense, because I kind of thought that because nobody was mentioning it as a potential winner for the Booker Prize, that would probably mean that it would be the one that I would enjoy the least out of that entire list. But no, I love that one. It's the one that I enjoyed the most out of the entire experience of reading that Booker Prize long list, short list. Now I'm hesitating, but it's because I'm not entirely sure whether Lanny was on the 2019 or the 2018 list. If Lanny was on the 2019 list, it's higher than An Orchestra of Minority in my appreciation, but otherwise it is An Orchestra of Minorities. But so yeah, this is the entirety of my 12 books for 2020 list, and so I'm actually gonna go on Goodreads for a second, because I had the list there, and so I did check it multiple times throughout the year, and that will be the easiest way for me to now figure out how many of them I actually got around to. Shelf, the 2020 TBR shelf. So I read Quichotte, read Ducks Newburyport, read Wolf Hall, read An Orchestra of Minority, did not get to the Don Quixote, I did not get to the Harry Potters. I'm missing books from this list. Great! I removed all of the ones that I unhauled, but so yeah, those I didn't read, of course, so... But, like, where's Warlight? No, not Warlight. So this is not the easiest way to do it, apparently, because I also removed... Oh, come on, what's the name of the book now? Well, The English Patient. I definitely also read The English Patient. And then, yeah, I had a book on my thumbnail that I didn't mention, I think. Yeah, okay, so it's going to be Tight Fit here, because I'll have it up here. After my editing me is going to figure out whether I landed on the 50% mark or not. So it's gonna be a tight race, it seems, and I'm actually gonna think, because I didn't read the 2 Don Quixotes, I didn't read the 2 Don Quixotes, I didn't read the 2 Harry Potters, I didn't read Catch-22, I didn't read what was the other one called? A Confederacy of Dunces. So that is 50%. So can I think of another one that I didn't read? It might just be 50-50, which is the same as I did with the fantasy one. So, I mean, at least I'm getting around to half of what I say that I was gonna get around to. But so if you haven't seen my 12 books for 2021 video, then I recommend you go and check it out, because I have put a system in place that's going to help me prioritize these books in 2021. And so I hope when I'm rewatching that video next year for this video, that it'll be 100%. I will have gotten around to all of them. In that case, it won't be an interesting video, but still. But so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know, like, if there are any books that you said you were gonna get around to in 2020 but totally didn't. I would love to commiserate with you about this, and then yeah, see you guys for a future video. Bye!